Mental representations and words. The world for me is not the same as the world in itself. When we hold an apple in our hands, our fingers process its external features: the round form, the smooth peel, the rough stem. Our brains then create an image of this apple in our minds. And each time we come across an apple afterwards, this image of the apple in our minds, this mental representation of apple, becomes clearer and sharper. This is how we discover the world. We perceive it with our senses and then create a mental image, a mental representation. But what does language have to do with this? In order to be able to speak about our mental representations with others, we give them names as abstract objects, or what we call words. Looking back at our apple, we need the word apple so that we can talk with others about the mental representation apple. A mental representation is an image in our minds of an actual object in the world. A word is a linguistic representation, which we use to name or label a mental representation. Words are what allow us to communicate with other people. When we talk about an apple with another person, their mind will retrieve their mental representation of an apple. This enables them to understand you without needing an actual apple in front of them. Everyone watching this video who hears the word apple will picture something similar, namely the fruit that we as a linguistic community associate in English with the word apple. This in turn makes it something that we can think about and communicate with others about. Thanks to words, language allows us to think about things and discuss them even when they're not in front of us. We might not have the apple in our hands, but we have it as a mental representation in our minds and as a word ready to roll off our tongues when we speak or to hear about with our ears when we listen. In this way, we can use language to project ourselves and others into all worlds for which we have developed mental representations and words. But there's a catch. This only works when those communicating think in a similar way. More properly said, mental representations are deeply embedded in culture. A mental representation such as dissident has a very different meaning and therefore triggers a very different mental image in a democracy than it does in a totalitarian state. Likewise, dog breeders will have a different mental representation for dog than a postal carrier. The same holds true for specialized terms. Someone who identifies with the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas will understand discourse as an exchange between rational individuals detached from the limits of space and time. Followers of the French philosopher Michel Foucault, in contrast, regard discourse as an instrument of power, one that is used by those with power to shape, one could even say manipulate, the world to suit their own purposes. And yet one thing is certain: it's nearly impossible to think about or talk about something that we cannot or haven't yet named. Take your toes. While each of our 5 fingers have their own specific names, the same isn't true for our toes. If you need to have a medical consultation by phone, it's more complicated to refer to a specific toe than it would be when talking about a specific finger. Back to our apple example. Most people have no idea what to call the bottom part of the apple. We don't have a mental representation, and therefore no word, simply because it isn't all that important in our lives. In this sense, vocabulary reveals what is important enough in the world to transform into language, both in the world of an individual person and in the world of an entire community, society, or culture.